The news is alarming. Russia's steel industry teeters on the brink of disaster. And this time, it's not foreign intelligence crying foul, it's Russia's own railway and financial data exposing a collapse that cannot be masked. A staggering debt of 3.36 trillion rubles pulses through Russian railways, the nation's largest employer, signaling a devastating reality. The very backbone of a once mighty superpower is shattering, and we're only witnessing the early signs of this catastrophe. Imagine a community of 700,000 individuals, their lives intertwined with Russian railways, simmering with fury. Overnight, these loyal workers and their families have been plunged into a frigid abyss of unemployment and despair. Yet, there's no official mass layoff, it's a cunning maneuver portrayed as mandatory unpaid leave. This orchestrated abandonment leaves hundreds of thousands stuck in a chilling limbo, deprived of their livelihoods and facing hunger without warning. They exist in an agonizing state, not quite employees, not quite unemployed, but as the living casualties of the Kremlin's relentless war machine. This chaos echoes the dark echoes of the 1990s, but this time, the collapse emerges from within an internal decision orchestrated by the Kremlin itself. They understand the peril of infuriating 700,000 desperate individuals. This could ignite a social explosion exponentially more uncontrollable than any previous descent. The sheer shock of this turmoil can only be understood by grasping the role of Russian railways in the nation's fabric. In Russia, oil and railways intertwine, they are the lifeblood of the economy. Russian Railways is not a mere transport company, it is the stronghold gripping the vast expanse of the country, stretching across 11 time zones. This metal web, over 85,000 kilometers long, once fueled the economic veins running to Moscow and St. Petersburg, fostered industry in the Urals, and ferried vital resources, like oil and military equipment, to the front lines. After 25 years of promised stability under Putin, this system has crumbled, shaking the very foundation of his reign. Imagine the tenets of the social contract that has defined Russian leadership: give up political freedoms in exchange for economic certainty and security. The 700,000 workers were the embodiment of this trust. They were not dissenters, they were the regime's staunchest supporters. But that trust vanished overnight when the Kremlin sacrificed these loyal individuals and their livelihoods for the sake of imperial ambitions far from home. In a startling twist, Russia's steel heart beats weaker than ever. This revelation doesn't come from Western intelligence. Instead, it's a bitter truth emerging from Russia's own vital statistics, railway and financial data that the Kremlin can no longer conceal. Russian Railways, the nation's largest employer, is crumbling under a staggering debt of 3.36 trillion rubles. What does this mean for the industrial backbone of a once mighty power? It signifies a break, an ignoble unraveling that could spiral into chaos. Picture this: over 700,000 employees, once proud railway workers, suddenly cast into a chasm of unemployment and uncertainty. This isn't a mass layoff but something much crueler, a deceitful abandonment dressed as unpaid leave. They are left to fend for themselves in a cruel world, with families that include millions left to face hunger and despair. Who would do this? The regime, cleverly dodging accountability, intends to keep these workers in a legal limbo, shackling them without income as they barely scrape by. As the fabric of loyalty begins to fray, these individuals are no longer just employees, they become prisoners. Their situation resembles the grim echoes of the 1990s, where betrayal and chaos took the stage once more. But now, it's not foreign forces that threaten stability, it's the very leaders who promised security. The Kremlin must understand the terrifying potential of 700,000 individuals stripped of hope. What might this unyielding anger lead to? The regime is aware that the discontent brewing within these ranks could be the spark for something far more volatile than the infamous March on Moscow. This could explode into a fervent uprising, a social upheaval primed to challenge the very foundation of the state. To grasp the true implications, one must recognize the unrivaled significance of Russian railways, the lifeblood of the nation stretched across 11 vast time zones. With an expansive reach of more than 85,000 kilometers from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok, its essential role cannot be overstated. This network connects oil shipments to military logistics, transporting everything from technology to tanks. During Putin's 25-year reign, this infrastructure has been promised to maintain stability. Yet, by putting the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands at risk, the Kremlin upends this narrative. The implicit social contract, give up political freedoms in exchange for economic stability, has been shattered. The people who once trusted the regime are now the ones facing betrayal. How will the Kremlin respond to the once loyal backbone fractured by its own decisions? The implications are dire. As workers turn to despair, the very essence of Russia's stability lies at risk. If the regime does not tread carefully, it could face a resonance of past uprisings, the tragic mistakes of history echoing loudly as discontent simmers, waiting for a match to ignite it into a roaring fire. In the aftermath of the humiliating turmoil of the 1990s, the 700,000 devoted workers of Russia's railways stood as the unbreakable promise between the regime and its people. These weren't the vocal dissenters in Moscow, but the quiet pillars of loyalty, the apolitical heart of the state, bound by unwavering faith and stability. Now, imagine a betrayal so deep it shatters that faith in an instant. Putin shattered that trust by feeding the voracious beast of the Ukrainian conflict with RZD and its 700,000 faithful servants. When their families enter the calculus, the seething mass swells to millions fueled by emptiness, rage, and desperation, with everything stripped away. The Kremlin grasps the danger like no one else. The starkest sign of terror isn't buried in balance sheets, it's a chilling revelation from RZD memos, unearthed by Ukrainian intelligence and backed by open-source experts. On the Kremlin's urgent command, RZD's leadership rushed to fortify over 30,000 guards with advanced protective equipment. This isn't defense against outsiders, it's a frantic shield against an internal storm, millions of enraged souls robbed of livelihoods, pride, and horizons. Yet for Putin, this is a perilous wager. Echoes of Russia's past rebellions haunt him, each one a dreadful warning. Picture January 22, 1905, hundreds of thousands of laborers trekked to St. Petersburg's Winter Palace. No uprising, a plea from the crown's most steadfast supporters. They bore images of the Tsar and holy relics, no radical banners. Their plea? Safeguard them from shady officials and greedy bosses draining their lives. The system met devotion with cruel force. That instant, the cherished illusion of the Tsar's guardianship crumbled beneath snowy boots. This treachery lit the fuse for the cataclysm of 1917, a betrayal etched in history's icy grip. Will Putin evade the same costly misstep, or is the fuse already sparking in the shadows? The air thickens with unanswered dread, the cold crunch of snow underfoot a whisper of what's to come. Imagine the bitter cold of St. Petersburg squares in 1905. Workers march with portraits of the Tsar. They chant for justice. But bullets rain down. The myth of the Tsar as protector shatters. Blood stains the snow. Now, fast forward. The betrayal lit the fuse for 1917's chaos. Similarly, today's 700,000 railway employees are the regime's loyal core. They trusted Putin. Yet, he's thrown them into unpaid leave. This isn't layoffs. It's a cruel economic stab. No blood, but just as ruthless. Winter 1917 grips Petrograd. War drags on. Hunger claws at bellies. No ideology fuels the spark. It's bread. Women flood streets, voices echoing bread. Workers at the Putilov factory strike. This giant, like railways, halts. Tsar Nicholas orders troops. The Volinsky regiment advances. Boots crunch ice. Guns glint. But a twist unfolds. Soldiers won't fire. These are their people. Their families. Bread riots rouse them. Next day, officers fall to bullets. Soldiers join rebels. Rhetorical question, why fire on your flesh and blood? The Tsar's fall wasn't Bolshevik plots. It was his betrayed army's shift. Loyalty crumbles. Weapons mean nothing without it. Today, Putin arms 30,000 militiamen. They'll face 700,000 furious workers. Neighbors. Former colleagues. Starving in same towns. Will they shoot? History's chill answer, no. This risks civil war. Shifting to 1962. Novocherkassk riots mirror this. Khrushchev hikes prices. Meat. Butter. Wages slash for railway workers. Production quotas crush. Smell of desperation fills air. Strikes erupt. Thousands storm party HQ, angry shouts pierce the night. Army ordered in. Some refuse. I won't shoot. KGB snipers arrive from Moscow. Blood flows. A provocative question: how does a regime fear its own shadow? Putin's gamble echoes 1962. Arm railways men. They might stay loyal. Fear loss more than comrades. But distrust festers. Inner security splits. Warning whispers, betrayal looms. Cliffhanger, echoes of 1998 rumble next. Rail wars threaten again. Will the spine snap? In the shadow of past rebellions, where soldiers balked at firing on their own kin, the 1962 Novocherkassk uprising eerily echoes Russia's railway disaster crisis, a powder keg of betrayal threatening civil strife. What chills your spine more, the stench of gunpowder waiting in Moscow's arsenal, or the betrayal that could shatter Putin's throne? Picture the bitter chill of June 1962, wind whistling through frost-kissed streets of Novocherkassk. Khrushchev's regime fueled outrage with skyrocketing prices on meat and butter, the fatty aroma of melting cuts vanishing from plates. Workers at the locomotive factory griped as quotas soared, crushing their earnings like iron fists on steel. Wages dwindled. Desperation clawed at bellies. Thousands struck, voices roaring in thunderous chants. They stormed the Communist Party headquarters, boots hammering pavement, fists pounding doors. Local troops faced orders to unleash gunfire. But defiance surged, generals among them muttering, "I won't fire on the people." Regret over 1917 loomed large. The system countered swiftly, snipers loyal to the KGB arrived from Moscow, cold accuracy in the chaos, elite guards crushing the dissent. Putin's gamble now? Arming 30,000 RZD guards against the 1917 echoes, betting on 1962's KGB-style obedience. Fearing Rosgvardia might falter, they rely on insiders terrified of losing crumbs, their own jobs dangling. The crumbling facade exposes rifts in the regime's iron grip. Fast forward to the 1990s, Yeltsin's reign shattered by rail wars in 1998. Tens of thousands of miners, unpaid for months, smelled the coal dust of betrayal thickening the air. Lacking march on Moscow might, they chose flesh as weapon. Bodies blocked the Trans-Siberian Railway, skin pressing against frozen tracks, vibrations humming under the weight. Weeks dragged on, stranding coal, oil, food, and war supplies. The nation choked. Logistics collapsed, hammering Yeltsin's fragile edifice, igniting the GKO bond crisis, a moratorium that bankrupted the state. Putin rode in on vows of stability, knowing full well the lesson. But now, not miners, but 700,000 railway souls haunt the rails. What if their unpaid misery explodes worse than 98? As memories of 1998's hungry blockades sting the air, grain rotting in stalled trains, unrifled bullets whispering regret, will Putin's armed puppet stifle the storm, or will it engulf him in vengeful fire? The rails tremble. Can you feel the pulse of rebellion building? In a staggering revelation, the core of Russia's industrial might is crumbling. Russian Railways, a once feared titan, now stands on the brink of financial ruin, staggering under a colossal debt of 3.36 trillion rubles. The very fabric of the nation's economy, the backbone of its military logistics, is fraying, threatening to plunge not just the railway system but the entire country into a chaotic abyss. But where did it all go wrong? What was once a symbol of national unity has devolved into an emblem of desperation. This decline is not merely a financial crisis, it is an existential upheaval that echoes the turmoil of the 1990s. For the 700,000 employees at Russian railways, their fates now hang in limbo. They face the grim uncertainties of unpaid leave, a harsh reality masquerading as routine bureaucratic procedure. This isn't just unemployment, it's a betrayal by a regime that once promised stability in exchange for loyalty, leaving families clinging to hope in an unforgiving world. By disguising mass layoffs as unpaid leaves, the Kremlin sidesteps accountability while condemning its most loyal workers to a future of hunger and hardship. The very essence of these workers, once touted as the stalwarts of the regime, has been disillusioned overnight. The sense of betrayal echoes in the silence of their homes, where dreams of stability have been cast into shadow. But what happens when those who were once loyal turn resentful? The regime's calculated move to bolster a private security force with arms, anticipating turmoil, reveals a deep-seated fear. One must ponder, how can a government that once thrived on the loyalty of its citizens respond to a looming uprising from its quietly simmering workforce? Amid this tension, one can hear the faint rustle of discontent, a prelude to a potential storm brewing in a nation already battered by the weight of historical discontent. The Kremlin's approach mirrors dark chapters of the past, the agony of 1905 and the turmoil of 1962 when ordinary workers confronted authority. The memories of these uprisings are as pungent as freshly turned earth, hinting at buried grievances waiting to surface. Will Russia's rail workers, equipped with the power of their numbers, reignite old struggles? Inside the steel body of the railroads lies a million unanswered questions. Could it be the workers who, in sheer refusal to toil under betrayal, become the very catalyst for change that Russians have long awaited? Now, as the taste of despair lingers unchanged, the echoes of past battles resonate louder. The fabric of the railway network hangs precariously on the edge of collapse, not just an economic disaster but a potential social explosion. What choices does the Kremlin truly have when faced with the reality of hundreds of thousands ready to defy their orders? The very system they built for control could unravel in an instant. Will the strains of history repeat, or will this moment become the turning point in Russia's ongoing narrative? The reality behind the polished surface of Russia's economy is stark. Data released by Russian Railways paints a grim picture of a system nearing collapse. This downfall was not abrupt. It reflects years of neglect and mismanagement, disrupting the shaky alliance upon which Putin's power has relied for over 2 decades. When the railways falter, it's not just trains that halt, the flow of money ceases. And when that happens, even the staunchest allies may turn away. Reports from think tanks, like the Wilson Center, have tracked how Russian railways, once a robust giant, succumbed to privation under Putin's kleptocracy. Instead of serving the nation's interests, it morphed into a vehicle for corruption and political loyalty, riddled with inefficiencies. The arrival of war exacerbated this decline. Sanctions imposed by the West obliterated RZD's vital international cargo operations in 2022, resulting in a staggering 95% drop in net profit, as reported by Reuters. But the most devastating blow came from leaked intelligence revealing the war's direct impact on transportation of military supplies, compounded by sabotage efforts. The financial structure crumbled under these pressures, revealing that the Kremlin had initiated the covert dismissal of thousands under the guise of mandatory unpaid leave. Let's consider the implications. On the East Siberian Line, a crucial route to Asia, coal shipments, essential for steel production and power generation, fell by 2.6% in just 1 year. This is alarming on its own, yet the real crisis lies deeper. Shipments of industrial materials dipped by 14.4%. And construction cargo, critical for building the nation's future, plummeted by 16.1%. These figures suggest an impending catastrophe, hinting at an economic downturn severe enough to rival peacetime recessions. The most alarming indicators appeared in the financial statements of major steel manufacturers at the core of Russia's economy. This situation transcends a mere economic downturn, it signals a societal rupture that could lead to unimaginable consequences. In a startling turn of events, the heart of Russia's industrial strength is crumbling. This isn't merely a financial downturn, it's a seismic shock to the foundations of power that Vladimir Putin has built over 2 decades. When the railway system falters, it's not just the cargo that comes to a halt, the very flow of money dries up. As revenues wane, even Putin's most steadfast allies are left questioning their future. The first casualty of this financial onslaught is the Magnitogorsk Iron and Steel Works, or MMK, a colossal symbol of Soviet industrial might. Nestled at the base of the Ural Mountains, this factory was envisioned by Stalin as Russia's steel heart, tirelessly producing the armor for tanks, steel for pipelines, and iron for the country's sprawling cities. Typically overseen by Viktor Rashnikov, a titan among oligarchs and a loyal supporter of Putin, MMK's fate was inextricably linked to Kremlin favor. However, with the war's toll weighing heavily on the economy, the situation turned dire. Recent financial figures revealed a 88.8% drop in net profits in just a year, resembling a bankruptcy declaration more than a corporate report. This was the downfall of an empire crafted by one of Putin's most trusted figures. Severstal, an emblem of modernity and Western ambition in Russia, also succumbed to the unfolding crisis. Under the vision of owner Alexei Mordshov, the company aimed to meet European standards while exporting high-tech steel to Western markets. Yet, the eruption of conflict severed his ties to Europe, plunging him into financial despair as sanctions obliterated his most lucrative market. The wave of chaos engulfs not only industries but the very essence of loyalty that had once sealed the relationship between oligarchs and the Kremlin. As the clock ticks down, the colossal structures that stood as pillars of the Russian economy now tremble under the weight of uncertainty. What happens when the giants of industry crumble? The ground beneath Putin's power begins to shake, each rumble louder than the last. This isn't just an economic crisis, this is a cataclysm poised to redefine the political landscape of Russia. Can the Kremlin contain the fallout? The answer lingers in the air, a bitter taste of betrayal mixed with impending chaos, as millions hold their breath. Imagine, if you dare, a once mighty titan of steel, Alexei Mordashov of Severstal, pushing his empire toward global heights. He dreamed of crafting advanced alloys to rival Europe, shipping them far and wide. Unlike his ruthless peers, he aimed for true international dominance. Yet, the wrath of conflict shattered his world. Sanctions first slammed the door on his richest European buyers, cutting off his lifeline. Then came the devastating second strike. Railway breakdowns crippled his logistics. Domestic hunger for goods evaporated. Severstal's earnings crashed, a brutal 55% tumble in just 1 year. Mordashov's bold, shining vision crumbled beneath the weight of imperial fantasies, all for a war that destroyed instead of built. But lurking in the financial shadows was something far more alarming than mere losses. His ledgers screamed negative cash flow, a term that spells doom for any titan. It meant outflows devoured inflows, raw materials, surging energy costs, worker pay, crushing taxes. All exit doors, no entry. Bankruptcy lurked, inevitable and merciless. These behemoths, once profit machines, now bled red. Steel isn't just metal, it's the unyielding spine of modern life. When it fractures, paralysis grips the whole. Feel the chill wind howling through empty factories, the grind of silent mills that once roared with power. What happens when a superpower's core erodes? Russia's facing this nightmare now, a steel famine gnawing at its economic heart. The ripple began small, targeting isolated pockets, but now it cascades like a furious avalanche, engulfing everything in its path. Civilian sectors bore the brunt, exposed and vulnerable. Even Rostat, the regime's own watchdog, can't mask the wreckage. The automotive dream, propagandized as the punch to Western imports, fizzled out. Assembly lines halted, one by one, starved of steel. Production nosedived by 13.7% for cars and trailers. Not just numbers, this is a severed artery, bleeding the nation's drive to halt. But the agony spreads unchecked. Steel's chokehold constricted construction, halting new dreams of homes across the frozen tundra. Feel the bite of cold winters creeping into unfinished shells, empty promises frozen in cement. Home furnishings wilted, fabrics thinned, clothing shortages biting deep. What humiliation awaits a leader who tore apart his own base for a doomed crusade? Could this betrayal, echoing forgotten revolutions, ignite a fire Putin never saw coming? As warehouses echo with emptiness, the scent of decay filling the air, one wonders, will this be the twist that shatters a regime built on lies? Stay tuned, for the fallout is just beginning, and it's about to get personal. The tale unfolds in a land once known for its strength, where the very core of industrial power is crumbling. Russia, a behemoth of might, faces an unprecedented collapse not from external foes, but from within its own borders. Evidence mounts from staggering official railway and financial reports, heralding a dire narrative that the Kremlin cannot obscure. Once hailed as an indomitable force, Russian railways, the heart of the nation's industrial framework, now bears the burden of an astronomical debt, 3.36 trillion rubles. What does it mean when a country's industrial lifeline falters? It means a community of 700,000 employees, dedicated and loyal, intertwined not only in their jobs but in the fabric of the nation itself, is on the brink of chaos. Without warning, these individuals find themselves in a precarious limbo, cast aside under the guise of mandatory unpaid leave. They are not officially laid off but left dangling, stripped of income, with uncertainty tightening around them like a vice. It is a disquieting resemblance to slavery, sacrificed on the altar of the regime's warfare ambitions. Imagine the icy fingers of despair enclosing the households of those who built and maintained the very infrastructure that Dmitry Medvedev once praised. As the war machine consumes resources, former employees and their families are thrust into the chilling abyss of poverty and hopelessness. Such anguish ignites a fury simmering beneath the surface, a hunger for justice that echoes through their communities like a distant thunder, foretelling a storm of anger. But what of the Kremlin's next move? The regime, fearing the wrath of an army of the disenfranchised, has begun arming over 30,000 security personnel. This is not for an external threat, it is aimed at the very people who once embodied the trust between the state and its citizens. Can 30,000 armed guards quell the rage of 700,000 disillusioned individuals? The stakes are high, and history teaches us that loyalty can falter. In Petersburg, the echoes of January 22, 1905, reverberate in the air. Workers once marched for dignity, demanding the protection of their czar against oppression, only to meet betrayal with bullets. Those very bullets extinguished the belief in a protector, igniting a revolution that would reshape the nation. Today, the stakes are equally grave. Can a regime risk betraying its most loyal workers without igniting the same flames of insurrection? Yet the narrative reaches even deeper roots. The iron grip of history teaches that hunger can ignite revolution. The cities brim with restlessness as the economy limps along. With every step, construction halts, leaving projects unfinished, and production lines dark. The contraction in steel, once the backbone of progress, has ripple effects reaching far beyond factories. Furniture production plummets, and even the simplest of consumer goods falter. As the civilian sector crumbles, the Kremlin sees no way forward but to devote remaining resources to the military. This, they believe, will secure their power. However, this path is akin to stripping a dying animal of its last vital organs to prolong its suffering. Without a civilian base, steel production will diminish even further, leading to an inevitable halt in military output. So what remains of the once strong promise of a self-sufficient Russia? The war economy is a mirage. The very foundation that sustained the state has fractured, revealing the hollow truth of years spent in false security. Can a fortress survive when its walls are built on sand? The nation stands at a crossroads, caught between the echoes of a glorious past and the stark reality of a crumbling future. The question remains, what will happen when the anger of the many becomes too great to ignore? Will the Kremlin find itself facing its own reckoning, or will it silence the voices of dissent before they rise? The clock is ticking. The tale unfolding in Russia is one of stark contrast and deep turmoil, as the country's industrial landscape, once a source of pride, crumbles before our eyes. The steel industry, a cornerstone of the nation's power, is facing an unprecedented crisis. The harrowing data from Russian railways reveals a staggering debt of 3.36 trillion rubles. These numbers are not just financial figures, they signify the unraveling of a superpower that once commanded respect on the global stage. Imagine a vast network, stretching over 85,000 kilometers, supporting everything from your morning bread to military operations abroad. Russian Railways, or RZD, is the lifeblood of this nation. It transports not only goods but also the very essence of state functionality. Yet now, this former giant is suffocating, leaving behind a community of 700,000 workers teetering on the brink of despair. These individuals and their families, thrown into a sea of uncertainty overnight, are grappling with the suffocating weight of unpaid leave masquerading as a temporary solution. But here's the shocking twist, RZD is not simply laying off workers, it's enacting a far-reaching abandonment tactic designed to evade responsibility while condemning its most loyal employees to a purgatory devoid of income. They dwell in limbo, not classified as unemployed but cut off from the safety net of society, falling into the cold grasp of poverty. This crisis transcends mere economic decline. It strikes at the very soul of the regime that promised stability in exchange for loyalty. For years, Vladimir Putin maintained a precarious balance, offering the illusion of support in return for silence. But the betrayal of these dedicated workers shatters that balance, creating an angry sea of discontent. Turn your attention to the Kremlin. Understanding this reality reveals a terrifying truth. Instead of seeking counsel or negotiating peace, it prepares to arm its own internal security force. Leaked communications suggest an alarming increase in security measures, highlighting the fear of an uprising not from foreign threats but from the very citizens once deemed the foundation of stability. As we look back at history, ominous echoes of 1905 and 1917 come to mind. The cries of hunger and desperation fueled revolutions, revealing a pattern of betrayal and fury that challenges the regime's very existence. So, what if those armed guards, poised to quell discontent, find themselves facing their friends and neighbors? What will happen when those who bear arms refuse to turn them on their fellow citizens? The stakes have never been higher. In a nation where a fragile agreement has been dismantled, the question looms large: will this be the catalyst for a palace coup, or ignite a public uprising? The silence in the corridors of power breeds danger, as discontent simmers just beneath the surface. Is Russia at the brink of an explosion that could change the course of its history forever? This impending clash, shaped by betrayal, desperation, and the thirst for change, holds the potential for profound transformation. The question that echoes through the empty trains of the RZD is not just a question of survival for the workers but a stark reflection of a nation on the edge. What will happen next as the specter of revolution looms closer? Amid the chaos consuming Russia, a profound question emerges: could the unexpected unraveling of the steel industry ignite an uprising capable of toppling the regime? In a stunning revelation, it's not whispers from Western intelligence warning of impending doom, but shocking truths buried in Russia's own railway and financial data. The collapse is staggering. Russian Railways, a critical pillar of the nation, is drowning in an astonishing debt of 3.36 trillion rubles, leaving the industrial backbone of a superpower shattered. This crisis doesn't merely threaten jobs, it teeters on the brink of provoking an explosive social reaction from 700,000 workers and their families, engulfing millions in a sudden tide of unemployment and despair. But strikingly, the cuts are masked in a sinister guise. Leaked communications suggest that instead of outright layoffs, the regime has opted for a deceptive strategy of unpaid leave, trapping these employees in a legal quagmire without income, affectionately termed mandatory leave. These individuals are not merely out of work, they find themselves in a harrowing state of limbo, their futures dangling in uncertainty, akin to modern slavery under the Kremlin's iron fist. This betrayal bears resemblance to the chaos of the 90s, yet arises not from outside forces but from the Kremlin's own machinations. They understand the intensity of the crisis like no one else. An angered populace, desperate and disillusioned, is a nightmare for the regime, reminiscent of past uprisings that redefined Russia. Just as history shows the dangers faced by rulers when their loyal subjects turn against them, this moment similarly threatens to unearth a crisis of loyalty. The enormity of Russian railways extends beyond mere transportation. It serves as the logistical spine of the nation, a network vital for economic and military operations. Cutting this lifeline often endangers not just jobs but the very narrative of stability that the regime has spun for decades, the exchange of political repression for economic security. By sacrificing the very backbone of its workforce, the Kremlin risks shattering trust among its staunchest supporters. In a chilling twist, the Kremlin appears to sense the danger, hastily arming over 30,000 private security personnel not against external enemies but to brace for potential civilian unrest. This preparation suggests a regime aware of the anger brewing beneath the surface yet unwilling to confront the root causes of that fury. Tension mounts as the country remembers its past. In a pivotal moment from history, ordinary workers once marched at the gates of power for relief, only to be met with violence. The memory of ruthless suppression against civilians still hangs like a shadow over the present. As anger simmers, the oligarchs, self-preserving and cowardly, remain a silent threat shuffled in the shadows. They don't resist openly through public dissent but engage in quieter battles that threaten the stability of governance. Emerging signs of unrest among oligarchs, coupled with a tacit resistance to Kremlin demands, Hint at a brewing storm, a silent rebellion where fortunes are quietly shifted to safer havens, and plans for new leadership whisper through elite circles. What path will Russia take? Will the unchecked economic collapse lead to the emergence of a new leader from within the establishment, a general or a chief intent on seizing power? Or will the failure to heed the chilling voice of the masses transform these government betrayals into something dangerously revolutionary? The answer lies ahead, shrouded in uncertainty as tensions spiral toward a climax. Building on the crisis of sinking fortunes and elite panic, we explore how oligarchs maneuver silently for a new savior. Will their secretive alliances shatter the regime or ignite an unstoppable firestorm? Imagine the hushed whispers in gilded Moscow halls. Billionaires, faces etched with worry, huddle over caviar platters. The stench of betrayal lingers in the air. These tycoons, once untouchable, now tremble. Their private jets idle, fortunes eroding. Who dares challenge the crumbling patriarch? A shocking twist, their chosen one isn't a populist hero, but a hardened insider, a general or intelligence chief from the pragmatic Siloviki faction. This shadowy figure, polished in secrecy, emerges not as a revolutionary, but a calculated protector. Rhetorical whisper, could a faceless bureaucrat really rescue empires teetering on collapse? The oligarchs rally quietly, pledging millions, media empires, and global ties. Their goal? Not rebellion, but preservation. Swap the man, save the machine. But what fuel drives this whispered coup? The palpable rage boiling from below. An unexpected shift. It's not just elite fear, it's the people's fury legitimizing the betrayal. Cliffhanger looms, as anger surges like a Siberian blizzard. Will this new leader quench the flames, or fan them into revolution? Continuing from oligarchs forging covert pacts for survival, we dive into the human wreckage of a dying steel giant. Picture Magnitogorsk's smoky towers crumbling, a bitter metallic tang choking the streets. How does a superpower's backbone snap, and who pays the ultimate price? In industrial heartlands like Magnitogorsk, Cheremkovo, or Novomoskovsk, entire existences crumble under one factory's shadow. Tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands, awaken to unemployment's icy grip. Rough hands, once gripping molten steel, now tremble idle. The sharp clang of hammers fades to deafening silence. Small vendors, feeding the beasts, fold overnight, empty storefronts echoing like ghosts. Restaurants empty, shops shutter, service networks unravel. It's no mere downturn, it's a societal abyss, where meager state aid mocks the devastation. Cities morph into cauldrons of despair, air thick with despair's acrid smell. But the ripples don't halt there. They surge toward Moscow's glitter and Petersburg's canals. Steel halts, and Avtovezi of Samara and countless others halt production, deprived of vital sheets. A worker's sturdy boots stumble home jobless, while Moscow dealerships spike prices in a cruel irony. When construction beams vanish, projects nationwide freeze, housing dreams fracture, infrastructure grinds to halt. The soft rustle of blueprints discarded haunts families. Rhetorical sting, if the Kremlin's empire feeds on steel, what happens when the forge cools forever? Twist revelation, this isn't isolated ruin, it's a contagion, threatening every home. Cliffhanger, as hunger's growl intensifies and streets fill with unrest, will economic despair spark a nationwide implosion, or force the elite's hand? Imagine a superpower's backbone shattering under its own weight. That's Russia today, where official railway and financial data expose a catastrophic collapse in the steel industry, far beyond any Western claims. What if the iron rails that once carried tanks and dreams are now crumbling, leaving 700,000 loyal workers in a frozen limbo of unpaid leave? This isn't just economics, it's a betrayal that echoes the ghosts of 1917, threatening to ignite a social inferno. In the heart of this implosion, a construction worker in St. Petersburg feels the bite of unpaid leave, his rough hands gripping tools that now gather dust. The scent of cold concrete fills the air as his family's dreams of a new home vanish like smoke. For the first 2 years of this war, the Kremlin deftly channeled fury outward, painting the West, NATO, or Ukrainian adversaries as villains. But now, that anger turns inward, sharp and unrelenting. Picture a worker in Magnitogorsk staring at the factory gates that slam shut, the clanging hammers silent, the acrid smell of extinguished furnaces lingering. He no longer curses Washington, instead, his fury targets the incompetent director, the governor hoarding resources for the fight, and at the apex, Vladimir Putin, the architect of this endless conflict. This isn't a mere recession. It's an industry's funeral, with repercussions that will haunt Russia eternally. Once those massive blast furnaces cool, reigniting them demands arduous months and colossal expenses. When factories shutter their doors, it's not only machinery that goes idle, the skilled masters, ingenious engineers, and diligent workers scatter, seeking horizons elsewhere or abandoning the land altogether. Russia loses not just steel behemoths, but the invaluable tapestry of knowledge, institutional wisdom, and human ingenuity essential to revive them. As Putin chases fleeting military glory in Ukraine, he forges the irreversible destruction of Russia's industrial prowess, severing the economic spine of his regime. A broken backbone never heals fully. What unfolds isn't a spreadsheet anomaly. It's a harrowing autopsy exposé. Putin's war juggernaut, insatiable, feasts on enemy soil and now ravenously consumes its own industrial core, the unyielding steel framework and those devoted 700,000 laborers. Consequently, the regime confronts an unprecedented dual menace. On one flank, the impending storm of an army of the starved, 700,000 souls ensnared in desolate monotowns, specters of 1917 looming. On the other, the clandestine plots brewing among oligarchs whose empires dissolve, scheming silent coups behind veiled doors. How long before this hunger-fueled wrath erupts, humiliating the Kremlin's unyielding grip and twisting the war's fate? Building on that shattering betrayal where unpaid leaves freeze workers' lives and shift anger from abroad to Putin's doorstep, watch as this industrial death ripples through Russia's tangled web. Ever wondered why a single shipment bottleneck in steel could starve an entire nation's ambitions? Feel the gritty vibration of halted cranes, the sting of unpaid bills like shards of broken glass. Iron ore, the lifeblood of railways, falters, shipments grind to a halt, crippling the flow of vital sheet metal. Car factories in distant plants screech to a pause, workers in Samara clutching layoffs like cold fists. Prices soar at Moscow dealerships, engines silent and lots drowning in untouchable metal. Construction grinds to a standstill nationwide, digging sites abandoned under gray skies. The question looms, will this cascade ignite the powder keg of unrest sooner than we fear, forcing the Kremlin to confront its hollow promises? Echoing the domino effect where steel shortages cripple cars, jobs vanish, and construction freezes, the Kremlin's illusion of control crumbles further. As rail wars of the 90s paralyzed economies with miners' blockades, could today's discarded railway faithful unleash an even deadlier chokehold? The rumble of trains once symbolized power, now echoes as a distant thunder of neglect. Families huddle in dim apartments, the chill of uncertainty seeping through thin walls, children's laughter muffled by worry. From Kaliningrad to Vladivostok, the 85,000-kilometer network, Russia's backbone, buckles under debt's crushing weight. RZD's 3.36 trillion rublet abyss swallows dreams, sacrificing 700,000 devout souls to feed the Ukraine quagmire. These weren't dissidents, they embodied loyalty, forging stability for Putin's reign. Yet overnight, they're cast into oblivion, not fired, mind you, but ensnared in a cunning trap of unpaid exile, incomes vaporized, basic needs unmet. Hunger gnaws, uncertainty looms. They're neither employed nor free, just sacrificial pawns in a war machine that devours its own. History whispers warnings. 1905's loyal marchers met bullets, shattering Tsar myths. 1917's bread riots turned troops' loyalties, ending empires. Now, armed militiamen prepare for insurrection, armored against kin. In 1962's Novicherkassk revolt, soldiers rebelled rather than slaughter kin over rations. Putin bets on inner enforcers, mirroring KGB snipers, to quell 700,000 enraged neighbors. But betrayal breeds revolt. The late 90s rail blockades bankrupted Yeltsin, birthing Putin. What if this reverse shackles logistics anew, toppling the regime in a poetic twist? Piecing together this fragility where past revolts expose security cracks and armed guardians eye their own, the story reveals a regime teetering on dual chasms. Is the Kremlin's panic arming of guards against 700,000 ghosts the ultimate admission of weakness, or a futile bluff that could shred Putin's myth? The clang of riot gear echoes desperation, smells of dun oil mix with fear sweat. Vehicles rumble like caged beasts, sights trained inward. RZD, once purveyor of tanks and oil, now outfits 30,000 private fists against brethren driven mad by loss. This crosshair's target isn't invaders, it's civilians, families stripped bare. Workers, neighbors, former comrades in unity. Will loyalty hold, or will mutiny mirror 1917 soldiers? The Kremlin's dread spirals, a social blast dwarfing Prigozhin's mutiny. Anger of millions, hungry and boundless. Deeper, oligarchs plot from shadows, fortunes eroding, eyeing palace seizures. This rupture isn't economic, it's existential, dynamiting Putin's 25-year stability pact. Sacrifice freedoms for security, voided. Now, 700,000 loyalists abandoned, zeitgeist shifts. Tsar Nicholas fell to bread-deprived troops refusing fire. Khrushchev silenced Novocherkassk with Moscow snipers. Putin courts RZD loyalists, fearing broader betrayal. Historical reverberations portend disaster. Could an internal rift morph into civil strife, swallowing armies and rulers alike? Tying back to armories amassing against internal tides and oligarchic backstabs, can Russia pivot from this abyss, or is collapse scripted? The acrid tang of betrayal fills nostrils, rifle clicks puncture silence. Families shiver, eyes sunken from want. Monotowns, once regime bulwarks, simmer with explosive discontent. 700,000 exiles, statist pillars discarded, haunt corridors of power. Projected uprising dwarfs past tremors, an unstoppable quake. Palace intrigue thickens, as elites witness empires crumble. Russia's steel soul devoured by war greed. The riddle endures, will this forge rebirth or final downfall? With humanity's back against the wall, what unforeseen turn might humiliate despots and redraw maps? Share thoughts below. The steel backbone of Russia crumbles, unveiling a dual threat unlike any before. On one hand, an army of hungry masses, 700,000 trapped in desolate towns echoing 1917's ghosts. On the other, shadowy oligarchs plotting a silent coup, their fortunes dissolving in the war's icy grip. Can you smell the desperation? Feel the chill of unpaid leaves settling like frost on empty wallets? Hear the distant rumble of locomotives silenced by debt's unyielding weight? Social upheaval no longer teases with maybes, it crouches, ready to strike. When? That's the chilling whisper in the wind. Will Russia's industrial implosion slam the brakes on the endless war? Or will the Kremlin summon dark sorcery to outlast this crucible of crises? Imagine the sharp sting of hunger pangs gnawing at families huddled in dim flats, the coarse texture of stale bread against parched lips. Sensory chaos builds, the acrid smoke of idle factories choking the air, distant sirens wailing like forgotten echoes. What shocks most, the betrayal that feasts on its own flesh? Twist, in this looming explosion, the irony bites deepest. A regime built on steel rails now forges its own chains, but watch as the oligarch's rebellion ignites not collapse, but a perverse renewal, swapping one tyrant for another in a masquerade of power. Ponder this, does the fire of dissent forge freedom, or just another cage? Share your takes below. Keep watching for the analysis that cuts through the noise. Turn on alerts for raw insights. Back us up with a thumbs up to fuel independent dives.